Hello and welcome to Sansad TV. You're watching discussion today with me, Rajat Kain. In this episode of the show, we'll discuss Finance Bill 2021 and with that, government's roadmap ahead for reviving the state of Indian economy. Well, in line with Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, the government started initiatives taken across the social sector, energy, manufacturing, and of course, health sector, among other areas or major areas. However, the major emphasis has been laid on the health sector given unprecedented situation which arose last year due to COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown impacting economies worldwide. Well, to discuss further on this issue and the government initiative that has been highlighted in the finance bill, or to say previously in Budget 2021, we're joined with panel of two guests. Many thanks for joining us, Dr. Ashok Vishandass. He is Director of EGROW, and Mr. Ajay Shankar, former Secretary, DIPP, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Many thanks, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start with you, Dr. Vishandass. Your first reaction to government initiative, or to say, they have taken several measures that has been a highlight of the budget and now the finance bill. What is that you have to say given the circumstances?
Yeah, this budget is very, very balanced. I think it's a dream budget and it's one of the very, very unique. It has a unique feature. And see, first thing is the defense. The defense, of course, occupies the commanding heights of all. If you see the allocation of ministry-wide, it commands the highest position at about 4.78 lakh crore. No cost is high enough to defend your territorial integrity and sovereignty, and therefore I think we can wait for. In a limiting case, in a very, very extreme situation, but the development can wait, but not the protection of our borders, and therefore the defense budget occupies the first position if we order the ministry in terms of the allocation. 4.78 lakh is very, very, very high in that sense, and therefore I give full marks to the our honorable FM. Health, of course, health is also very, because the lives are very important, and the livelihood, and that debate always is going on, but lives are very important and the livelihood can also wait for some time. So these two things, to my mind, the defense and health is very good. And some people criticize that the personal income tax, it has remained constant, because there is no elbow room for the Honorable Finance Minister to further bring it down. Right. Therefore, keeping it constant is also a good thing. It has not increased. So I think the lowest income tax rates are there, and compliance rate, if it's high, that's very, very good. And on the agriculture front, the agriculture infra fund will be made available to APMC also, and the Operation Green schemes. Because I have served in the agriculture ministry also as a chairman of the Commission on Agriculture Cost and Prices, I must tell you, there are so many perishable goods which do not see light of the day, and this is a national wastage. That like perishable commodity, earlier there were three. The top does not mean the dictionary meaning. Tomato, onions, and potato. These three commodities were classified as green under the green scheme. Now, in addition to these three top vegetables, tomato, onion, and potato, there are 22 more perishable commodity whose shelf life is very low, has also been brought under this scheme. This is wonderful thing. They have brought it. So you see the canvas of the budget. It touches each chord of the. Right. If it's a small scheme, it has not remained untouched. But if it is a big scheme like defense or a very, very, very high profile, that also has been addressed, and the the concerns of small people has not gone unescaped. That's the beauty of this
Dr.
budget.
Ashok Vishandass. Right, sir.
Yeah, let me just
Okay,
just one
please,
second.
please,
Let
go
me
ahead.
add even the Eklavya scheme, the tribal for the tribal people, the downtrodden people. I will call it as a social justice. So 750 Eklavya model residential schools are being planned for the tribal area. So this is wonderful. I mean, if you draw that parallel and from the Dronacharya and Eklavya, so on that pattern, so 750. So those are the very remarkable key points which really pleases me and which are going to have impact for long-term basis.
Right, Dr. Vishandass. Just stay on. Mr. Ajay Shankar is also there with us. Many thanks, Mr. Shankar, for continuing on the show, sir. Per you, what are the major takeaways from the finance bill that has been passed in the Parliament? Now, this is the bill, of course, which has several amendments to it after the budget was proposed. So there have been some additions, there have been amendments to budget, but what per you are the important things that were the highlight?
The most important thing about this budget is that it has recognized the need for some change in course and some change in direction to cope with the very difficult year that we have been through and willingness to try new things to take us on a higher growth trajectory. So let me list a few of the most important ones. So the most important one is this announcement, which means that we will address the issue of NPAs with the banks through what is popularly called a bad bank, but essentially the creation of two companies, one asset reconstruction, asset management, so that the banks will have clean balance sheets and should be in a position to start lending normally or aggressively or vigorously to support the growth that should now be around the corner. So this is a very major departure from past practice, and this is a big decision. The second very big decision is the announcement of the creation of a development finance institution, which will provide long-term finance for infrastructure projects. Now, if you look at what has been in the works is an infrastructure pipeline of over 100 lakh crores, which need to be implemented, some in the private sector, some in the public sector, some in a PPP mode. But that needs financing, and the big learning of the last 20 years has been that you need long-term debt finance for infrastructure projects, which have a long gestation period. And a lot of the problems of our bank NPAs is because banks we were not supposed to give long-term financing for infrastructure projects, found themselves financing road projects, power projects, etc., where some delays, some risks are there, and therefore a lot of the NPA problem is a result of that. And what is heartening is the subsequent statements of the finance minister and from the ministry that they will be willing to go the extra mile to see that the development finance institution actually works. So they're willing to look at some government guarantees of this institution being able to go into RBI and take money from RBI, etc. So that's a very big decision.
Absolutely. Please go on.
And the third major pillar in this is that the announcement of a over 2 lakh crore production link incentive scheme for 10 key areas of manufacturing and industrial growth, and the willingness of the finance minister to have stakeholder consultation across the board to see where we can change import duties to support domestic manufacturing and domestic value addition in a manner which is win-win over a sustained period of time, undoing the inverted duty structures and shifting it in a way which gives the right incentives for manufacturing in India. That's also a major course correction, a major shift, and in my view, the right direction. So these three major pillars have the potential of actually sending us on a much higher growth trajectory as we begin recovering from the COVID crisis.
Mr. Ajay Shankar, just one small point before I go off to Dr. Vishandass. As you say, the big course correction in the manufacturing sector. Could you elaborate further on that?
You see, the earlier view was that we are a free market economy and government should stay away from the industrial sector, and market forces will decide where investments will take place, what would happen. Now, the course correction is that we have a production-linked incentive scheme where cash incentives will be given on the achievement of well-identified benchmarks in 10 broad and critical areas which can take India to the frontiers of manufacturing over the coming years.
That's
so
important.
This is a huge shift in industrial policy and the willingness of the state to do a little more than just create good macroeconomic conditions of low inflation and social and physical capital.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Ajay Shankar. Just stay on here. Well, Dr. Vishandass, as Mr. Ajay Shankar just mentioned about a course correction, especially in the manufacturing sector, this is one sector which we have seen, that has been struggling, especially like in last year, of course, it was an extraordinary situation because of COVID. But manufacturing sector is one sector that contributes a lot to any growing economy. So how do you see the production-linked incentive in 10 key areas would provide fillip to Indian economy? Dr. Vishandass.
This has to be seen. Yes, thank you. This has to be seen because our overarching objective is to become Atmanirbhar. Now, Atmanirbhar has to be seen with the small thing. Now, even the big computers of the today, the Apple are even you look at the service sector or the software thing. They started Wipro, for instance, a very small company with the oil. Now, unless you enable them and have the hand-holding approach to the small, medium, micro manufacturing unit, they cannot grow big. And when the Honorable Prime Minister has said we have to be vocal but local, so that essentially means you have to give a hand-holding kind of thing in the beginning to our micro, small and medium manufacturing unit. And for that, those are very, very important because this is, unless we invest in them, we take good care of such micro, small MSME units, we cannot think of becoming Atmanirbhar. Now, this COVID, this is not a very, very good thing it has happened, but it has also taught us many lessons. Now, we have seen if there is a supply bottlenecks, now, many countries, you remember from March 2020 till say end of December 2020, there were many countries. Luckily, I'll bring the agriculture and food security. Now, food security, we were not only able to feed our own countrymen, our own fellow countrymen, but we were able to feed the other countries' people who were not having sufficient food supply. Now, imagine a situation, it was a reverse kind of situation when our farmers were not able to produce. Now, everything else can wait, but not the food security. Now, the best investment is in agriculture. Now, government has taken care of the primary sector. If you see the history of India's development and investment in what we did, if you see from post-independence, even the recently 1991 the reform. Now we started reform from service sector, manufacturing, but agriculture reforms escaped. Now that shows that we gave scant love and affection to our agriculture sector. Now they are our backbone. Agriculture is the lifeblood of Indian economy. It should not be seen how much percentage, about 16-17%, but how much is important. Now let me quote the MS Swaminathan. He is on record saying, who is a great agriculture scientist. He said India would have never become nuclear if we were not food sufficient. Now that's a very, and my research also shows that it would have been extremely difficult for India to become nuclear country if we were not food sufficient, because there was so much pressure. We defied the world opinion, world pressure, because we were self-sufficient. Now, if you are not self-sufficient, you can be armed twisted and you can be manipulated. Now, see what happened in Galwan Valley. I won't go into the detail, but we were able to resist the pressure of other countries who are not so friendly to us, because we are to a great extent self-sufficient in many aspects. So we have to reduce the dependence, and dependence and Atmanirbhar, they go hand in hand.
Right, Dr. Vishandass.
Therefore,
right.
The MSME sector is very, very important.
Absolutely. Just stay on, Dr. Vishandass. Mr. Shankar, we were just discussing the broader macroeconomic picture while we're discussing about manufacturing sector and the incentives the government has given. In terms of, say, balance of receipts, in terms of the fiscal deficit, where do we stand and what bigger challenge do you see in terms of overcoming it?
Here again, I must appreciate the realism and pragmatism of the government. It has accepted that the fiscal deficit is something which we need not worry about today, because we need to get recovery in the economy. And there is a willingness to recognize, A, that the deficit will be larger and is larger and will remain large for a couple of years at least. And thereafter, once we are on a normal growth trajectory, the deficit can be brought down in a manner in which it is acceptable to market conditions here and the rest of the world. So this is a measure of realism that has crept in, which is highly welcome, because it would have been inappropriate to try and reduce the fiscal deficit at this juncture when the economy is in great difficulty. And in this respect, the government also has been sensible that it has not gone in for raising taxes, because by raising taxes, the resources that would have come in would have been modest, the adverse effect on market sentiment would have been greater, and in the balance, the benefits would not have been there. So I think the government has been sensible enough in accepting that difficult times need a different approach, and a higher deficit is something we can live with, should live with, to get back to normal growth trajectory as soon as possible. So I think this is something which needs to be appreciated, because there were concerns before the budget whether the government would be bold enough about the deficit or whether it would try and raise taxes. And in this regard, one other point which was not in the budget itself, but I was very glad to see the finance minister talk about it, is that she has indicated that there is willingness to discuss bringing petroleum products into the GST with the states in the GST Council. Because if you're looking at manufacturing and economic activity, and if the prices of petrol and diesel are so high that they put us at a competitive disadvantage with our neighbors or other countries, then this is something we need to address. So from a theoretical point of view, ideally, petroleum products which are essential to manufacturing and transport should be in the middle level of the GST tax level. Here, the tax rates are not 28%, which is the highest level, but well over 50% if you take center and states combined. Now, it's a difficult challenge, because if revenue is lost by bringing it to GST, where do we cut expenditure or where do we raise revenue elsewhere? But I'm so glad that the discussion may begin and there is a willingness to address this issue, because it will be a key to increasing competitiveness of economic activity in India.
Absolutely. Right. Dr. Vishandass, there has been a pragmatic picture, of course, and government's approach has been extremely pragmatic in terms of the fiscal deficit. And we know that there would be some challenges ahead for a couple of years at least, given 2020 and the state of economy. Now, as we know, due to pandemic and of course, like otherwise as well, health has been one sector in which the government has emphasized. They've increased the budgetary allocation by 137%. Now, what is that? You have to first react on that. And secondly, where will the money come for the health sector?
See, I find if there is a will, there is a way. So health, the lives are most important. We have to imagine how, suppose there is no, God forbid, if there is no life, everything else has no meaning. So if one sector requires, the two most important sectors which require our dignity of our very existence is the defense and health. I'm undermining the importance of other sector. But to my mind, these are the two most important. One is the dignity and sovereignty of the country. No cost is high enough if we have to defend our borders, and then more important is the lives of the people. And this was extraordinary non-standard year, this 2020-21. Therefore, if we have to proportionately, given the challenges, a health ministry, the health sector has to be allocated sufficiently higher amount. Now look at this, anybody can just walk in and get the vaccine. Now, even people now we see the government, how it is possible? Because government has taken good care of it, and therefore there is no scarcity of vaccine. Government has spent sufficient attention, both both in terms of funds and non-fund in terms of its logistic and other things. And so this is very important. Many times we do not realize the value of things which are made available to us. And therefore, we do not see the importance of that. But to my mind, this health sector, the government has done extraordinary efforts to see, and not only our own country, but to almost another, I think more than 100 countries we have provided the vaccine. So this is a proud moment as an Indian citizen that we are able to provide. And then unless your country becomes self-sufficient and prosperous, you can't help anybody. Even at an individual level, unless I am self-sufficient, I can't help my neighbors, my brothers, my other thing. Likewise, if your nation is not prosperous, it's not self-sufficient, it cannot help. And if we have to assume a big brother's role, which I think we should, and unless we take good care whenever there is a need, we raise our hand. Yes, we are with you. We'll give whatever. Now, be it food, be it vaccine, be it medicine, we supply to medicine to many countries. So the government's willingness, and I tell you, the tax portion, maybe it looks as if we have not done enough work on the taxation, but I think this tax rate are just optimum, and compliance is very, very important. And the government has been careful on compliance. And higher tax, my research shows, higher tax does not lead to higher revenue. Because then compliance become a problem. So we have to have a kind of optimum equilibrium, which is the highest. I want to be very cautious on use of this word, which is the maximum tax when compliance is maximum. And maximum does not mean the theoretical maximum, but which is optimum level of taxation, which leads to the highest level of compliance. And that is very important, because these two factors will lead to the optimum or maximum generation of or collection of the revenue. These are very important. Government has been very careful. Therefore, they have provided so much for the health sector, for the defense, and other key sectors of the economy, and has undergone the reforms which have been eluding our economy prior to 2014 period. Because 91, if you see the reform, let me also add one thing. When you had to launch the vehicle or launch the rocket, it has to be fired from the bottom. What happened in 91? We tried to make the reforms from the top. That means tertiary sector, which is service sector, then manufacturing, which is secondary sector, and primary sector was bypassed. Now it is happening that primary sector, which is agriculture, is being, so we are launching the rocket from the bottom, and the agriculture sector is also taking due care. So virtually we are firing our economy from the primary sector, that is from the bottom, and only then our rocket can be launched. If I can draw the analogy between the growth of the economy on one hand and the launching of the rocket.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Vishandass. Mr. Ajay Shankar, I beg your pardon. Just as we are about to close the show, sir, given the recovery phase of economy, as all of us acknowledge that this year, coming couple of years would be a recovery phase of Indian economy, sharp recovery rather, would we see more spending on social sector still?
I think the time has come when we should begin a serious effort to introduce a proper social safety net in the country. Because on the labor reforms, we have now introduced fixed term employment. And we are moving towards coming to terms with the nature of the new economy where jobs are flexible, firms outsource a lot of activity. So if India is to succeed in the job creation front and have a competitive workforce which should attract investment for creating jobs, then I think a discussion and forward movement on a full-fledged social safety net is necessary.
Right.
And the good thing is that the social safety code provides for covering all workers and not just the workers in the organized sector. And just to give you a bit of history, the social safety system was first introduced in Germany by Bismarck in 1880s, who was not a socialist, but he wanted Germany to industrialize rapidly and become a leading industrial power. And he saw social safety for workers as an essential building block for rapid growth and industrialization. So it's time we should also think how quickly we can move in that direction, because the more productive our workers are, the more capital investment we can get into labor intensive activity, and the faster we'll be able to create jobs and get rid of poverty. So I think that's the big challenge, creation of jobs and getting private investment to come into creation of jobs.
Right.
So that's a big challenge, and hopefully we will handle it right.
Right. So there you have Mr. Ajay Shankar, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, and Dr. Ashok Vishandass, Director, EGROW. Just giving their opinion on budget and, of course, Finance Bill 2021. Well, that's it in this episode of Discussion Today. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Stay safe.